Most of us that have been in church for any length of time have heard the story in 1 Kings chapter 18 about Elijah and the prophets of Baal, and where um, they were trying to make a sacrifice, and the prophets of Baal did all these crazy things, and nothing happened. And then Elijah called down fire from heaven, and God responded and turned the hearts of the people of Israel back to him. And then Elijah told them to round up the prophets, and they killed all 450 of them. A lot of times people stop there at the great victory, but the story continues into chapter 19, where Elijah then runs away because he's afraid. He prays again, and it starts to rain after 3.5 years, and he warns Ahab about a couple things. Ahab the king. Ahab goes back and tells his queen Jezebel what all happened to the prophets, and she's mad, so she threatens to kill Elijah. And so he runs out into the wilderness. And when he gets there, he's exhausted from the events, and he lays down, and then the angel comes to him and wakes him up, feeds him, gives him some water to drink, and then he goes back to sleep, and the angel does this a second time. And then it says that the second meal sustained him for 40 days while he went from where he was to the mountain that God had told him to go to. And God met with him there. And on the mountain, God asks him an interesting question. He asks him, "What are you doing here?" And Elijah responds with a really interesting statement. He says he's very jealous for God, and that the people have broken the covenants with God, and the people have thrown down God's altars, and the people have killed the prophets of God. And then there's this really interesting either vision or physical thing that took place where God calls him to the edge of this cave, and he looks out, and it says that God passed by, and that there was a great rushing wind, that a wind that split the mountains in half, but God wasn't in the wind. Then it says after that there was an earthquake that was terrifying, but God wasn't in the earthquake. And then it says after that there was a fire, but that God wasn't in the fire. And then it says following that there was a still small voice. And it doesn't say whether God was in the still small voice or not. It just says at the end there was a still small voice. And after that, it says that Elijah takes his mantle and wraps it around his face and goes back outside of the cave, and God asks him again, "Elijah, what are you doing here?" And Elijah gives him the exact same word-for-word answer. "I'm very jealous of you. The people have broken your covenants, and the people have torn down your altars, and the people have killed your prophets." And then God tells him to go just continue to do his job. Go anoint a couple of new people to be kings in certain places, and then to find Elisha. And I've always thought that was interesting, and those stories I've always heard as separate stories, and that the overwhelming theme is that you need to wait for God to tell you something in the still small voice, because he wasn't going to be necessarily in the big giant things. And it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that God was in the still small voice. It just says that after those great big things happened, that there was a still small voice. And I want you to think about this for a second, that maybe after the big calamities in your life, because it says that, Elijah said, they've torn down, or they have forsaken your covenant. They've forsaken the voice that you have given. That there was a great wind that had been interrupted, that had broken the mountains in half. And I think those things are comparable. And it says that they have torn down your altars, which is an earth-shattering deal, much like an earthquake. And they have killed your prophets, much like he had just done after the fire had been called down. He killed the prophets of Baal. And after that, there's supposed to be a still small voice. And I think what God was trying to tell him is, after all these great, horrible calamities have taken place, Elijah, you need to be the still small voice. It's not necessarily the voice of God. It's the voice of the people of God. It's the voice of the prophets of God. It is a still small voice to still proclaim the truth of God. So as we look around and we hear about the wars in Iran and Ukraine, and we hear about gas prices, and we hear about all the tension in America, and we hear about all the horrible things that are taking place, Christians, I think that when we see all those things, God's not in those things, but God is in us. We still have that Holy Spirit of God living inside of us, and I think he still needs us to be that still small voice. So today, go out and tell somebody about Jesus and that he loves them. You don't have to be big and bold about it. You don't have to be strong and proud and mighty about it. Maybe just be still. Maybe just be small. Maybe just be right. God bless you.